All right. So thanks everyone today for joining AFAs 201, part 2 to our AFAs 101 class. So we'll do a deep dive on the different AFA types. We'll talk specifically about material deviation clauses and how you can use those to arm and improve different AFA types. And then we'll also talk specifically about our favorite material deviation approach, which is the activity collared approach. And if you're one of our clients, you've probably heard about us talk about this before. So we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. But before we start, we thought we'd have some fun and compare AFA types to some superheroes. So once, looks like we already got a question. So 1 second here. So, hey, Todd, if you just go ahead and submit any questions to the Q&A, and then once we get to the end, we will open it up for live chat. I'm going to start with a poll, and let's just go ahead and relaunch this. All right, first polling question. Oh, sorry, wrong poll. Okay, first polling question. If hourly billing was a superhero or a villain, which would it be? Tough question. There is a right answer. We'll give it 30 seconds for the voting to come in. Don't be shy. We won't pick on anyone. Predictions, Laura?
I mean, I can see the results, so I think I would be biased, but
I forgot you could see
very interested so far in what it's coming out at.
All right, let's end the polling. All right, any last minute changes? No? Okay. Go ahead and share the results. Wow, 61% say hourly billing is the Joker.
I'd have to agree with that.
You agree with that?
Yeah, I'm starting to have second thoughts.
Yeah, 28% say Loki, 6% say the Hulk. Curious to know why people chose to make their choices here. 6% say Batman. So what did we choose? So we think that hourly billing is Loki. And the reason why is that you never know what you're going to get. And so obviously you've all joined this webinar because you fully are embracing AFAs, as you can see from how many people thought that hourly billing was the Joker. But with hourly billing, it can look one way, end up looking at the end looking completely different. It can feel familiar and comfortable, almost like a brother at times, which makes it easy to fall back to. So that's what we thought hourly billing was low-key. Laura, what do you want to take us through a few more AFA types here? This is obviously not an AFA type.
Yeah, I'm gonna go through a few AFA types. I'm not super across my superheroes, so David has been teaching me all of the strengths and weaknesses of them. So thanks, David. So I'm just going to run with what I know, which is the pricing types. So first, we've got the capped fee. The capped fee is still driven by hourly rates. It's kind of like the starter approach, someone who's a little bit nervous about trying an AFA. So they use a capped fee. Ultimately, it's still driven by time-based billing. So your firms are going to be incentivized to kind of hit the cap. David?
Yeah, so we compared the cap fees to Robin. I know that a lot of our friends on the call probably love cap fees, so don't be offended too much by this. But we call the Robin Hero is really more of a superhero light, and we think cap fees are really more of an AFA light. It doesn't give you, it's not a full AFA because you're still relying on hourly billing to determine ultimately how much you pay. And the fact that it does shift all the risk to the law firm, it sounds great in theory. But the reality is that means that the cap might be set too high because the risk is shifted to the firm. And then you don't really have a mechanism to adjust the cap fee unless you do what we're going to mention a little bit later to strengthen this cap fee approach. And this is a sidekick to another hourly billing dependent AFA as well, which is the collared fee with risk sharing. Laura, tell us about this collared fee.
Right, so the collared fee is kind of like a cap, except we put a little bit of a risk sharing collar around it. So we start with a budget. If that budget is, if we go over the budget by time-based billing, then there is a discount on that additional price. And same if we go under, then the law firm shares those savings with the client.
Yeah, so because, as Laura said, there's a discount if the firm exceeds the collar. Sometimes it's a 50% discount, so a harsh penalty on the firm for billing beyond the collar. We compare this to Batman because Batman uses fear as a tool and as a mechanism. And so that's what the collared fee with risk sharing does, is it uses fear as a tool with the goal of incentivizing the law firm to be more efficient. So it's still hourly billing in nature, just like Robin, just like Batman is a normal human, but he uses tools to drive the desired outcomes. So that's what we thought we'd compare him to Batman. The next one is a flat fee per matter.
Okay, so flat fee per matter is what most people think of when they think of an AFA. It's just a fixed fee for the whole matter. No frills, no up and down. There's not a lot of negotiation or room for change in scope yet. So the flat fee is super predictable, and most people would apply this to matters where they're pretty confident in the scope of work staying the same.
We compared the flat fee per matter to Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel is the strongest superhero, and therefore we feel strongly about the flat fee approach. However, without a material deviation language, this approach is still a little stubborn, a little bit rigid. And so we'll talk about how to improve upon the flat fee approach a little bit later. Portfolio fixed fee.
Portfolio fixed fee. So I've actually seen a lot of these lately. So this is where you might have a number of different matters rolled into one, maybe annual fee or fee at a high level for a series of different work. So it might be a fixed fee per year, and you might roll into that 20 or 30, you might not know how many, smaller matters, repetitive matters.
Yeah, so we thought this was the Hulk because it's just massive, combines a fee amount for multiple matters in a particular practice area. The good thing is that you can handle a lot all at once, but that might be too big of a solution than you actually need, because then you're getting so far away from the actual scope of work that it's kind of hard to scope out and define what all is included, and it can turn into something where you're constantly having to adjust the portfolio fixed fee. So there's definitely some drawbacks with this approach. What about the fixed fee per activity?
This is probably the one that we encourage the most. This is similar to the flat fee, except you're asking for the fixed fee to be broken out into the phase or activity level. So you might have it broken out at each phase of the litigation, and then even further at the activities within that litigation. You're still rolling that fee up into a total fee for the matter so that you get that nice cost predictability. But then you have that fee broken out, and you can use that to manage a deviation in scope, or if you stop at a particular phase.
We thought that this was like Spider-Man because it gives you a lot of flexibility. You're not locked into paying an overall amount. Because you're paying by activity or by phase. If a certain phase or activity goes away, you have the flexibility to adjust the fee amount more easily. So we said, Spider-Man uses independent webs to wrap everything together into a nice overall model. This wraps all the line items together into a nice overall AFA approach, and it's smart enough to deal with complexity, which is great.
Value-based.
Favorite one, right, Laura?
Yes, this is my favorite one. So this is where you tie the fee to a particular outcome in the matter, or you might tie it to a series of outcomes. So say that you want your law firm to settle a case early, you might be willing to pay more than what the price per activity would be up to a certain point. So you're incentivizing your firms to hit particular outcomes, and that's why it's a value-driven AFA.
So we compared the value-based AFA to Wonder Woman because her greatest strength is her greatest weakness, her need to win. So this is all about outcomes. So you're not paying for effort. Hourly billing is paying for effort. A value-based AFA is, what is the outcome we want? That's the outcome. That's what we'll pay for. So it's all about paying for. Sometimes you can combine a success bonus with a reduced fixed fee, and we'll talk about that in more specific examples later. But the great thing is that you want to move towards paying for outcomes, and both sides would prefer to. I think this is a win-win situation for both the firm and the client. So we really love the value-based AFA approach. Now that we've gone through and we've given you the different AFA types at a high level, we'll do another poll. Let me go ahead and stop the sharing. All right, which of those AFA types do you think is the most effective generally? Capped fees, collared fees, flat fee per matter, fixed fee per phase, portfolio AFA, or value-based AFA? All right, we'll give it 30 more seconds. If you haven't voted, go ahead and get on there and vote. We have a question. How practical are value-based AFAs for large advisory deals where the scope changes? And we have another comment. We have to define effective on most effective AFAs generally. Maybe we should have just changed it. What's your favorite AFA to use? And all right, we're gonna go ahead and end the polling and share the results. 71% of the audience say the fixed fee per phase is most effective.
Nice. Nobody likes my value-based AFA, my favorite AFA type.
Looks like only 5%.
I think we've scared people from the capped fee, David. Nobody wants to admit that they love a capped fee.
I know you all love capped fees. Don't lie to us. Don't lie to us. All right. So on the question, Laura, what are your thoughts on that? For large advisory deals where the scope changes, do you think, how would you advise using a value-based arrangement in that situation?
It depends on the type of matter. If it was a commercial advice piece, sometimes you might tie the fee to the value of the commercial outcome. So that might be the value of a contract you're advising on. And sometimes that's a good way to make sure that from your point of view, you're paying a fee that reflects the value of that advice. And the law firm is maybe even getting more money than they would if they would be doing that by time.
Yeah, so I've seen clients too that you define success for that particular project, however you define it, and it's you're going to get X fee at a minimum for covering at least your costs, but we'll provide a kicker on top of that if you deliver a certain outcome, and sometimes that outcome is completely subjective to what the client has considered as success. If it's not something as clear like a litigation matter, it works a little bit better because you've got very clear outcomes. So it can be a little bit tougher and more challenging with where the outcome is very subjective, but I've still seen clients implement that type of an approach. All right, so so we all love AFAs. 70% of people love fixed fees by phase, and we know a lot of our audience here are clients of ours using PERSUIT and running AFAs at the matter level for every matter they have that comes in the door. So this is probably a biased. This is probably this audience is more pro AFA than a typical audience, but we still see that companies are way more resistant to AFAs than they say. Everyone says that they want to do AFAs, but the reality is there's a lot more resistance to implementing them. So Laura, do you want to talk through a few really what the reasons are why companies are so resistant to AFAs, and maybe we can dispel some of the myths around them?
Yeah. So there's many concerns that are brought up from clients and law firms about the use of AFAs. The first main one is that one party is going to win and one party is going to lose. So ultimately, a client is going to get a great deal and the law firm is going to miss out on extra cash that they would get from an hourly rate, or the client's going to be overpaying where the matter doesn't end up taking that much time or effort by the law firm. The second one is that you're going to lose quality. So your fixed fee cost is going to come at the cost of quality, because the firms won't be incentivized to produce the best results because they'll be trying to cut costs. And then the third one is that, well, if I don't know what's going to happen with the matter, if I don't know, if it's going to settle early, or if I don't know, if a shareholder is going to raise a dispute, then how will I know that I'm getting a good deal, and how will the law firm even commit to that anyway? So we might jump into the first myth. I'm actually going to kick it over to David to talk to the first perception, which is that nobody wins, or one person wins and one person loses.
Yeah, so everyone assumes that, okay, give me, everyone, when you do an AFA, you think, did I get a better deal than I would have got under hourly arrangement? And if I got a better deal than what I would have gotten under an hourly arrangement because the firm billed more hours, then, the hourly billing the shadow bill would calculate that I would have paid 100,000, but I only paid 80,000. Then that means I saved 20 grand. The firm lost 20 grand. I've made 20 grand. So by definition, by looking at the shadow bill, what that means is that you think that this is a zero sum game. One's going to win and one's going to lose every single time. We don't agree with that. And the reason we don't agree with that is because a firm can actually be more profitable while charging you as a client less. So how does that make sense? How can you charge less and make more money? As a percentage, you're bringing in less revenue as a firm, but your profit margin can still go up. And the key is that the firm can reduce its costs. So if you look at this example, this is an example where a firm reduces its internal costs and passes some, but not all of that savings back to the client. So year one, let's say year one under an hourly billing arrangement for an investigation of medium complexity, you've got 5 lawyers on the project. Maybe 4 of them are senior associates, 1 partner. You're doing a lot of work. The actual internal cost to the firm, because of the amount of hours and the resources dedicated to that project, are $320,000. So the firm makes an $80,000 profit under that hourly billing arrangement, which is a $20,000 margin or 20% margin. And the client had to pay 400 grand. Year 2, same project, similar project, or same project essentially under a flat fee for an investigation of a same or similar fact pattern. And this time the client agrees to a $300 flat fee with the law firm. This time the law firm is going to make $100,000 less in revenue, but the law firm is going to bring in some more junior resources under the project potentially. They're going to do things more efficiently, so they'll take less hours to complete certain tasks. Maybe they invest in technology to eliminate a lot of manual and repeat work. And so for that reason, the law firm is able to reduce its costs and deliver the service at an internal cost of $210,000. So the firm, despite charging the client $100,000 less, actually profited an extra $10,000. They increased their profit margin to 30% under that flat fee. So it's not easy for a firm to reduce its costs, and it doesn't mean that because a firm is lowering its price that it's not actually hurting its profit margin. But the idea here is that it's not always a zero sum game. The firm can be more efficient, find ways to reduce its costs, and still profit more while charging you as a client less. And that's why AFAs, that's why people need to do more AFAs. It's better for both sides. What's the second? What about the second myth here? I talked about leverage. What do you think, Laura? Does that mean that you're going to get a worse
service out of your firms? No, not necessarily. And there are a number of things you can do to mitigate a perceived loss in quality. You can pair your fixed fee with a success or a performance bonus, or you can tie it to those values like the value-based AFA that we spoke about earlier. If the scope varies, I mean, the best fixed fee has one with a really nice scope set out and an agreement at the start that if there is a material deviation in the matter, that the fee will be amended in a fair and measurable way. Ultimately, the more AFAs you do and the more it becomes acceptable, the less chance there's going to be that you're going to be losing quality because you're getting a lower price. And an AFA doesn't necessarily mean a lower price anyway, it just means a fairer, more predictable price. And then ultimately the quality of service is table stakes. So firms aren't going to be sacrificing the quality of their work and their opportunities in the future to win more work just because they're trying to cut costs. David, do you want to expand?
Yeah. So one of the things we've heard before is even particularly with a cap fee. Okay, I'm just worried that if a firm hits their billing, hits the cap, and they still have got a month more work to do, are they really incentivized to do a good job after that point because they're no longer making money on the case? That was a concern that's been raised before, has been asked about. So like you said, Laura, if the scope is, if that would indicate to me that the scope must have changed, that there must be significantly more work required. And in that case, you do need to adjust the fee amount. But if it's just the case that the firm took more hours than for the exact same scope, then the risk is really on them to perform the work efficiently. So the price should only change if the actual scope has gone up. And like you said, quality is table stakes. A firm is not going to sacrifice quality, even if they are taking a hit on their profit for a particular matter, because otherwise they'll never get chosen again for future work. So that, yes, enough on that point. What's the third kind of concern here?
The third concern is, I think you've touched on it, David, is that if there is a change in the scope of the matter, if you can't predict the way that a matter will play out over time, you need to have some kind of metric built into the fixed fee that allows you to fairly agree on an amendment to the fee to make up for that change in scope and a significant or a material change in the amount of work that's required by the firm.
Yeah, so that's really where we get into material deviation clauses, and that's the fact that when we go through all the different superheroes and the different AFA types, each of them have really drawbacks, but almost all of the drawbacks are related to how they handle change, right? So a flat fee per matter doesn't address changes in scope. And I think the idea is that you're hoping that if you're doing a lot of flat fees, that it balances out over time. Maybe you win maybe one firm, maybe you win some, you lose some. It kind of balances out over time. You don't want to change. You don't want to change the actual fee amount very often, and there's good reasons for that. Like takes time and effort to adjust a fee in AFA over time, and so there's definitely advantages of having just both sides share the risk, flat fee. Let's not pre-negotiate any material deviation language, but it really is a best practice to actually define how are we going to change the price if the scope changes, and do it in a way that is simple and doesn't take a lot of time. That's kind of the secret sauce. The other problems with these other models, cap fees are still reliant on hourly billing. Collared fees still reliant on hourly billing. Portfolio fee, it doesn't control the inputs. So if the number of cases, so you've got a lot of matters, you can't really control if one matter is triple the size of another matter. The portfolio fee doesn't really handle that unless you're agreeing to what each of those specific matters costs, and then you're kind of getting away from the essence of the portfolio fee. Fee per activity is really effective, but then you don't get the total cost of visibility. So if you just say, here's the price for the depositions, here's the price for the motions, and you don't actually ask for the total price in the matter, it works because you'll pay for all the activities and you may have a strong price for each of those activities. So it's a good approach, but then you as the client lose the overall cost predictability that you may be looking for. So what Laura and I have done is we've taken the weaknesses of each of our superheroes and we tried to augment their weaknesses of each of the AFA types with a specific material deviation clause or approach that kind of fills the gap. So you need to arm your AFAs with the right material deviation clauses. So with each of our material deviation, with each of our AFAs here, we've given you a suggested approach to handling changes in scope. So with a cap fee, for instance, you can actually engage in phase-based caps with an activity caller. So rather than just saying, here's an overall capped fee of $1 million to handle the matter, what's become a best practice is to set a cap at each phase to still define your assumptions in each phase, and then to set a collar around those assumptions. So for instance, phase 3 discovery is going to be $300,000 cap fee, but we're going to assume that there's 10 depositions within that phase with a 20% activity collar. So if there ends up being 13 or more depositions, then we'll adjust the price, we'll adjust the cap upward. And if there's 8 or less depositions, then 20% less than we assumed, we'll adjust the cap downward. Because it's not fair if the scope changes significantly. It's not fair that the cap is still set at a certain amount. You should be able to lower the cap, and you should also be able to increase the cap if there is a significant deviation there. Laura, do you want to take us through some of the others here?
Yeah, so like David said, we're pairing each of these AFAs with the appropriate tool to manage changes in scope. So the flat fee per matter, that can be supported by an activity collar. So if there is a change in the number of activities in a phase, then the price will be adjusted accordingly. We normally set a percentage for the collar of activities. So we started around 30%, but you can change that. And that means that if there is a change in the major cost drivers of 30% or more, then the price will be adjusted by the cost per activity. If the change falls under that 30%, then the fixed fee remains the same. And then the same with portfolio fixed fee, you're usually paying a price either per matter that's rolled into a yearly rate for a predicted number of matters. If the number of matters increases up or down by 30%, or I think David's got 10% here in the number of matters, then you pay that additional cost accordingly per number of matters. If it falls under that 10%, then it rolls into that portfolio fee so that you're maintaining a little bit of that cost predictability. And then fixed fee by phase, you can actually get the material deviation to apply at a more granular level. So if there is a change in the phase, then you can get the price to adjust accordingly. So David's given some examples on the right there of how you might apply that to a real matter.
Yeah. So as far as the phase level activity collar there, so really a similar approach to what we mentioned with the cap fees. You're defining your assumptions at the phase level and then adjusting the fixed fee at that phase if there's a material deviation in the quantity of those assumptions. And one of the best practices here is to actually pre-negotiate what the fee is for each of those activities, which I think we will talk to in a little bit more detail. On the value-based AFA, so you've got multiple. So rather than just saying, here's success on the matter, win the case, here's a bonus for that. What we've seen be really effective is a tiered bonus by phase. So maybe option 1 is the case is dismissed in pleadings, and you will pay $50,000 with a $100,000 bonus. Option 2 is the case is dismissed at the motion for summary judgment stage. So the bonus, maybe the bonus is less, but the flat fee is higher. And then option 3, you get trial verdict in your favor, $500,000 plus a $20,000 bonus. So you can actually build in multiple options depending on what the outcome may be for that value-based AFA. So we're giving Wonder Woman her shield there with the right material deviation approach. And we got a question. We'll be sending out the slides. Just email david@persuit.com after the webinar, and then I'll send you the slides. Laura, what do you think? You've helped a lot of our clients with activity collared AFAs. Do you think that these, have you gotten good feedback on these? What do you think about the benefits of this approach?
Yeah. So the benefits of the activity collared AFA, number one is that it provides flexibility. That's the main thing. So it addresses that fear that clients have had using AFAs in the past, where there's going to be a change in scope. And also clients care about law firms, and they care about them making sure that the law firms are getting, that their services are valued. So flexibility is important so that you're not undercutting the law firms either. If they do end up putting in more work and the cost drivers increase, then they're getting paid accordingly and their services are still valued. So flexibility is probably number one benefit that I get in terms of feedback.
That's great. Yeah, so the flexibility, how does this compare to like a pure activity based approach where you're not getting it, you're just saying, here's the price for all the inputs, right? Here's the price for a deposition. Here's the price for a motion to dismiss. Do you think, I guess, is there a big difference to that approach versus the activity caller, just paying for the activities as they come in?
Yeah, paying for the activities as they come in is helpful, but it doesn't give you the ability to forecast what the costing is going to be. So it doesn't give you a big picture look at the whole matter. And then also when you're evaluating the RFPs and you're evaluating the different firms, you can evaluate them at the fixed fee per matter at that higher level, rather than considering what each of the activities are. So the predictability is the key there.
Yeah.
If the scope doesn't change outside of that collar, if it changes a little bit or it goes up and down, I mean, every matter is probably going to shift a little bit here and there, but unless it hits that threshold, the price remains the same.
Right. So that's a key difference, is paying per activities, you don't have the total price predictability. And then also you're trying to, if you pay purely based on the activity, you're trying to define every activity or every phase that could happen. Whereas with a flat fee with an activity collar, you're limiting how many things can change the price and how often you need to renegotiate, because you just choose the major cost drivers, and those are the only things that can trigger the change. So I think we're trying to balance out getting the predictability without having to constantly change the price or having to go back and look at the number of hours billed as the pricing mechanism. So that's kind of the desired approach. So talking about the major cost drivers, and those are the only things that can trigger a change if you do an activity collar. So let's say you have a flat fee of $1 million to handle the case from start to finish. You define the 5 or 6 major cost drivers in that matter, and you quantify them. So it's not just, hey, we're going to need dispositive motions. We're going to need depositions. Give an assumption on how many. So how many fact witnesses depositions are you going to have? How many experts are you going to have? How many documents for review? How many dispositive motions? How many court conferences? And then by giving those assumptions and then asking firms for a price, the firms are going to have enough information to figure out how much strategy they're going to need, how much analysis is going to be required. There will be other things that needs to take place and things that are hard to quantify. But what we're arguing here is that by quantifying the major cost drivers, you're going to be able to come to an agreement on the total price that's fair, because those major cost drivers dictate how much prep work's required, how much document production hours and review and is going to be. So these drive the cost of everything else. So if you can quantify the major things, then you're going to be able to get multiple bids from multiple firms as to the total price, as well as the price of each of those cost drivers, so that if there is a material deviation, you know exactly how much to pay, how much to increase or decrease the total by if there is a material deviation. Laura, did I kind of leave anything out of that description, or anything you'd add on to that?
How definitive do I have to be in terms of these numbers? Can I guess? What if I don't know how many documents there are going to be for review? What if I've got just a rough estimate? Is that okay?
Yeah, so you're not going to necessarily know exactly what's going to be required, right? Especially when you're getting and trying to implement this at the beginning of the case before things have really gotten going. But you can look back at your prior data. You can go back and look at previous matters to get a best guess of what's likely to be required in this particular matter. And so much of the information in the complaint will help you to figure that out. But even if you don't get it exactly right, you want to give your best guess and your best assumption. Ask firms for their assumptions. Maybe you get 2 or 3 firms to give you their assumptions for what's likely to take place in the matter. And then after reviewing those assumptions, you can actually, if you need to clarify it and adjust what your assumptions are, ask the firms to revise their proposed price based on a new set of assumptions. That's a healthy exercise before you actually come to a final agreement on the price. But even if things change from what after doing that exercise later on, if there's a significant change in the scope, you have preset pricing at the activity level to know how much to adjust the price upward or downward by. If that's so, you don't have to get it exactly right, because that's the whole point of material deviation language, is that if there is a significant change, you can adjust. So this is an example of some language that many of our clients are using in all of their RFPs. And so the way that we recommend clients doing AFAs is to get multiple proposals from multiple firms in an RFP at the matter level, and to include some language like this around what will happen if the case changes, or if it's settled or is dismissed, or if I need a lot more or a lot less work. This predefines what can trigger a change. So all these bullets define, these are the what is it, 8 things, 5, 6, 7, 8 things that can trigger a change on this matter. If you come back to me and say, hey, I did a lot more hours in research, that's not going to trigger a change in price. Only if the number of these activities here changes by more than 30%, would you adjust the price. And then if you look at the right-hand side, you're going to have ask firms to give you a fee per activity, not because you're not going to get billed per activity. You're going to be billed a pro rata amount of the total price that you agree, but you get the price per activity to know how much to adjust that price downward or upward if things change materially. So any questions at this? Does anyone have any questions, or Laura, do you have any comments or any other kind of observations from what how you've seen clients implement this in practice, and maybe any insights from that?
Not really. I'm a corporate and commercial lawyer, so my interest is where this applies to more transactional matters, where maybe you don't have the ability to quantify specific activities, or all of the activities are not the major cost drivers of the matter. If anyone's interested in seeing that, we do have another example of how that would be applied to a transactional matter. We do have a question. Is there a way to leverage firms to do some of this work to implement AFAs for win-win scenarios?
I'm not sure I understand that question, Ali. Let's see, we got a couple other questions coming in here.
Can we do this on maybe a portfolio basis? Is that what we're asking, rather than matter by matter?
Yeah, so with a large volume of matters, so I'm assuming that this question is around maybe the complexity of the activity colored approach with smaller engagements. So you don't actually have to take this approach for every type of an engagement, but we've certainly seen it used on smaller projects, even if it's not a large litigation matter. And I think Laura's going to take us through an example for just maybe a commercial advice project, how you might implement an activity colored in a non-litigation context. But if I didn't quite catch the question the right way, please feel free to hit the raise your hand button and we can go ahead and let you speak. We have another question. Do you think that this incentivizes firms to overwork the matter to realize the increase? That's a good question. What do you think, Laura? You think it incentivizes firms to overwork the matter to realize the increase?
I'm not sure how they would do that in a litigation sense. And I don't know what benefit they would have, because I don't know how you could create more cost driving activities. Have I misunderstood the question?
So is the firm going to say we need more we need more motions, or we need more depositions because they're going to get paid for each of those activities? I haven't had any of that feedback from any of our clients, but would be curious to know if any of the clients on the line have had that experience. Would love to know. I haven't had any of that. Haven't heard that as an issue with it before. Got another question. Given that doc review is usually done by an e-discovery provider and the number of docs are most likely going to be culled out before going into the review phase, what's the number of doc review referenced here? So it would typically be the number of documents after that culling phase is what you would assume in this scenario. So you wouldn't assume the entire review population, but you could certainly provide some assumptions on the number of interviewees and some other information to give the firms more context as far as likely how many documents are going to be there after discovery is kind of completed.
David, we had another question about the flat fee model. How does everyone evaluate if the flat fee is a fair figure? For example, do you compare resources with expected hours and then apply a discount or another method, or just take it on trust?
So that is a great question. And so what we argue at PERSUIT is that the only way to know if you're getting a fair price, whether you do an activity colored AFA, a flat fee, a portfolio fee, the only way to know whether you're getting a market competitive price is to go to the market and ask multiple firms to give you AFA proposals. And that's why that's what we do at PERSUIT is we help clients on every single matter. You send out a request to multiple firms for proposals for what they would charge at the activity level, at the phase level, to handle that matter, whether it be a litigation matter, a transactional matter, or any other matter type. That's the only way to know that you're going to get a fair price is by testing the market for that amount. Otherwise, you would have to go back and look at historical hourly billings, try to calculate the appropriate rate times the appropriate number of hours. And it's so difficult to find an exact match for what those prior case, comparing a prior case to a new case. That's why the best way is to ask multiple firms and to actually let the market dictate what the fair price is for the work. And that's how you're going to get the price for all these activities to also be competitive. So it's not just the competitive total price, it's also a competitive pricing at the phase level. So that's a great question. Do we get another?
I just wanted to add, David, sometimes the firms don't know where they sit in the market in terms of their pricing, and giving them that opportunity allows them to see maybe they're sitting up here and all of their peers are sitting down here, and putting them through that process allows them to get a bit of transparency about how they're pricing their services and give them the opportunity to come more in line with the market.
Exactly. Looks like we have a couple people who raised their hand. I can go ahead and unmute you and allow you to talk. Hey, Nick, are you able to speak? I think you just need to unmute yourself. No, I think maybe we lost him. Okay, this is an example here on the screen of what we mean, a real life example of pricing that's submitted both at the phase level and at the activity level. So you can see phase 1, initial case assessment and early steps. And you can not only ask firms to give you pricing for what the entire phase would cost, but they would also break that out by activity. So you can see witness interviews, maybe you're assuming 7 to 10 witnesses, and the firms are giving you pricing for how much, for what they would charge you for those interviews. Likewise, in the pretrial pleadings and motions stage, you can ask for both the phase level fee as well as the price for a specific motion to dismiss, a specific answer, court conferences. And so if the assumptions change, you have a really good bargaining position to go back and adjust the fee amount because you have pricing that's been proposed at that activity level. Laura, do you want to talk a little bit about how you should go about tracking an activity-based AFA later on? Is there, do you go back and do like shadow billing and look at the hourly bills to figure out how to adjust it with an activity caller? I know we've already talked about it a little bit, but.
Yeah, I would do it at, you can do it at the phase level. So you can check in at the phase level and look at the activities, compare the original assumed quantity with the actual quantity of activities that's been performed, and then adjust the cost that way. Or you can do it at the billing phase, go back and check their invoice and compare the quantity assumed with what's performed.
Yep. Yeah, so you see that example on document review. You originally assumption was 5,000 documents. You asked the firms to come back and give you an accounting of how many were performed later after a document review vendor already did their culling. So it turns out that there's 5,500. That's an increase of 500 documents, but it's not a 30% increase. So there's no adjustment amount there. One thing to note here also, if you're assuming just one motion for summary judgment, and there's 0, obviously that's 100%. That's a 100% change. So that does trigger the deviation as well. So when you assume 1, any change upward or downward is going to trigger the material deviation clause. You can see with expert depths, just one more expert depth, not enough to trigger the change. So I think this is just a really simple and easy way to adjust that doesn't require heavy look back at the number of hours. I think we had a question about, do you advise asking for the number of hours info for AFA situations? I don't think it's I think you can ask for it. I think you just need to be really clear that the number of hours is not an assumption upon which the AFA can change. As long as you do, unless you're using a collared, or unless you're using one of the AFA types that relies on hourly billing, then absolutely that's going to dictate how much you pay. But with a fixed fee approach, I don't recommend allowing the number of hours billed to impact what ultimately gets paid.
And I think after this slide, David, we've just got an example for Peter's asked if he can see how this might apply to a more transactional matter. So we talk about the activity collared AFAs, where sometimes you need to adapt the activities over to different values in the matter and different elements of the transaction. So in this example, I've taken an M&A scope and I've taken some of the key cost drivers from that scope and listed them here so that you can quantify some of the values with the matter, and a change in those values might justify a change in the fixed fee. Does anyone have any additional values or elements of a more transactional matter that might be considered key cost drivers? Peter, I'm interested to know your thoughts on these values, whether you think that they would be reflective of the cost of a matter. 2 people have raised their hand. David, can we...
Hi, Simon.
Yeah, hi David, hi Laura. One of those drivers, what about if the deal fails to go through, broken deal?
That's great. So you can absolutely ask for a broken deal discount. That is a common approach when you're doing an AFA, is to include kind of what's the discount if the deal doesn't go through.
Yeah. especially when you're asking for the fee to be broken out at the phase level. So if it stops at due diligence, for example, then you pay the fee up to that phase.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments from you, Simon, or anyone else?
No, that's great. Thank you, David.
Thank you. The last slide here before we and just open it up broadly for questions that we talked about it a little bit earlier, but really the best AFAs are market-driven AFAs. We can't emphasize that enough. Going out to multiple firms, whether you're using our platform on PERSUIT or another mechanism to send requests out, but you need to test the market to know what the appropriate fee amount is. And we think that that's a really fair way to treat your panel firms, because otherwise, if you're on a panel and you have no knowledge of which new matters are out there, and you as a client are just going and just handpicking whichever firm you want, that's not a fair way to treat your panel firm. So what we hear from firms a lot is, I'd rather know and have an opportunity to bid on each matter that comes in the door and be able to give you the pricing for that matter. I might be able to give a more competitive fee arrangement in June than I can in July, because I have a lot more capacity on my team. So I can give you a more discounted price because I have more capacity. I need the work. Maybe I've just never done work for this client in this practice area. So I want to give a more competitive price than maybe I normally would to prove myself and to prove our team that we can handle this work in a great way. And so you're best off as a client, and the firms are best off by taking an approach that means for every matter that comes in, we're going to ask for an AFA. We're going to get a fixed fee at the total price level, fixed fee at the phase and activity level, and let the market determine what a fair price is for each of those things. So we'll close with that, and just and more broadly open up for any kind of final questions or comments from the audience. No more questions. I don't think we have any more poll questions to get everyone excited. I hope you agree that the activity colored approach is a great way to handle material deviations.
Peter said that one thing he's found is that the commercial value is not a predictive driver. Interesting.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
Awesome.
All right, we can go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all so much for joining.
Thanks for the feedback. Okay. All right, should we jump off?